In today's show, we discuss, does the UK treat ex-offenders fairly?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasula, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Taya Boya. Taya, hello, my friend, once again. I hope you are keeping safe and well.
Yeah, Tony, what the hell? The lucky ones die first. You know what I always say.
All our listeners are going to take that on board. I'm really... Mr. Grumpy Tayo, come on, be more upbeat. Say hi to our listeners.
Hello, guest.
Anyway, enough of these shenanigans. In today's show, we discuss, does the UK treat ex-offenders fairly? And we're quite blessed this morning because we have a guest with us.
Hey!
Yay! You heard her in the background. Her name is Ellery Cosette. Sorry, I even said that wrong. Coslet. Please correct me, Ellery. I'm really sorry.
Larry, she just told you a minute
ago.
Listen, I've given up trying to correct people with my name. It's Ellery, celery, schmellery, and anything in between. Call me what you like. It doesn't really matter. But thanks, Teo, for introducing, for welcoming the guest. Don't worry about the listeners, but you know. That's fine.
It's like that, indeed. Thank you for bringing your dynamism.
All right.
Anyway, we can say Ellery is a director of Grow Inspires. And I want to give her a few moments just to explain, for the benefit of our listeners, what that is and what that entails. So, Ellery, please explain what that is, please.
Sure thing. Okay, thanks for having me, guys. So Grow Inspires was set up by me when I left. I've got a lived experience of the criminal justice system. I went to prison, and upon my release, I wanted to set up a business. And whilst I was in prison, I realised that there was very little training for entrepreneurship, if you like. And I didn't realise how difficult it would be on release to actually get a normal job, if you like, or a job. I've got quite an interesting background in sort of high-level law and finance and all kinds of shenanigans. And it just struck me that entrepreneurship was the way forward. So we set up Grow Inspires. I met this wonderful guy called Mark Neal that is a senior lecturer at the Centre for Innovation and Enterprise at Bristol University. And together we set up Grow Inspires with a view to alleviate this sort of tag, if you like, that the ex-offenders have. You know, it's not the sentence that's handed down which is the problem. It's what happens when they come out into society. So that's what we do, and we've put together an accelerator that we run for the master's program at Bristol University for them, and we've also tagged on a free membership of a business networking group which helps build experience, strength and hope. And we've also given them through a partnership with a wonderful platform called Silvertree access, and it's free to a trading platform where they can actually trade their goods and services. So we hope at least the aim is to try and create contributors from claimants, if you like, so that these people are actually, and me included, that we're contributing back to society. So I think that's important.
Okay, that's a nice description of what you do, and you're clearly giving hope to ex-offenders and giving them an opportunity to change their situation and move forward. Now, I must ask you, obviously our listeners are probably going to be thinking similarly. You mentioned there that you yourself were in that position. So are you at liberty to elaborate?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was incarcerated for my part in a Class B sort of cannabis conspiracy, something which I've always denied my involvement in. I had a lot of buy-to-let properties in all over the country, in South Wales and wider. And unfortunately, there was a gang involved that had infiltrated our properties, and the police thought that we were obviously involved. We did have an association with these people, but not in the we are growing cannabis with them sort of way. I mean, these people had approached me because I used to deal a lot in new build properties, and so I had an association with these people anyway. So I'd also lost substantial income because I was running a fund at the time, so we lost millions. So the police essentially had a reason, if you like, why I would have suddenly trammeled into the murky world of growing cannabis. I mean, if anybody's ever seen my plant growing abilities, they would know very quickly that growing plants probably wasn't going to be top of my agenda. Green sleeves and green fingers is not a name that anybody, I burn everything I cook, and I sort of mutilate plants. So not to
Are you as good as my wife, who I claim is the only person I know who can actually kill an artificial plant?
Yes. Even cacti sort of cringe from me. It's like desert storm out there. So yes. So I was at Eastwood Park Women's Prison in Gloucestershire, and I taught women to read. I mean, it was about 48% illiteracy rate in that prison, and I had the privilege of teaching a number of women to read from scratch, which was a huge. In fact, I always say this, look, being able to teach somebody to do something like that, which maybe somebody like me coming from quite a privileged background takes for granted, is a huge thing. And in fact, the prison environment, estate as it is very nurturing and supportive to people. The problem starts with society when you leave, which leads many people to ask the question, I know what society thinks of ex-offenders, so I've experienced it myself. People used to, step over to the other side of the road. Oh, here she comes, the ex-offender. I mean, I set up my business, the business network, Love Entrepreneurs, simply because I couldn't actually go and network with other businesses, because people would always, want to label me as an ex-offender. They were
Can I jump in there? What sort of examples can you share of the type of, a sense of discrimination against you? And how did they find out? Or did you lay it on the table and then you realize that they're demeaning?
I mean, when you live in a small community, everybody knows anyway. I think that's true, and people know and people talk. It's all over Google. So this is another problem. And yeah, I did speak to people about it, of course, because I'm quite open about it. I don't believe in they're going to find out anyway. Why not tell them the truth? And examples are, people wouldn't do business with you. And still now I've got 5 years later, myriad examples of people not wanting to do business with me, or not wanting to join Love Entrepreneurs, for that reason. So everybody that we have now, we've got over 400 members, and everybody that we have knows exactly, my background, and, because I have a policy of complete honesty, and that's okay. But back to the Growing Spires thing. I mean, there was one example in prison which really struck me, was because I was quite a senior lawyer, in an American law firm. I trained in the City of London. I've worked extensively in law. So I had quite a privileged background. But I remember distinctly one probation officer saying to me, well, you're not a lawyer anymore. You're not, you were now an ex-offender. As if that is your now title, that is your now label, and that is what you are, which would be fine if there were sufficient jobs, to match or mirror the qualifications that I have. I'm not averse to working in factories or cleaning toilets or anything like that. It's not that at all. I mean, I worked in a bakery for 4 years running as a student, stacking crumpets. I even got promoted because I was so good to the donut section, which was something. So there is a career there for me. But the point is, what I've always argued is this is such a waste of taxpayers' money, because it's the taxpayer that picks up the bill for those who don't take up low-level jobs. Many of them are still on benefits, so they're still claiming from the state. Many with really awful mental health issues, with no hope of picking themselves up. Therefore, going back into crime becomes a very attractive promulgation for them. It becomes a very appealing thought because, of course, we all know, I mean, criminals, they're not going to be that fussed on, what qualifications you have. They're going to be more interested in, are you prepared to do the do? So really, this was based on my experience.
Sorry to interject there, but do you think the hesitancy from employers in particular have this issue with trust? That's if that's compromised in some way, and an ex-offender has obviously the trust element because they've broken the law. So you can see employers being hesitant, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally understand that. And I don't think the truck or the issue is really with the right of an employer to be hesitant or wary or concerned. Those are all very legitimate rights. And in fact, I would have had those before going to prison too. But what I'm saying...
I wanted to ask that very question. And if you hadn't been to prison, wouldn't you treat ex-offenders precisely the same way as everybody else?
No, I wouldn't, because I've hired some in the past, because I've always believed, I'm quite a spiritual person. I've always believed in giving people a second chance, because I think that's really important. But I tell you straight, I have always been a proponent of honesty and truth. If they can be honest and truthful with me about their past, then I will give them a chance. The moment they err from that honesty and truth, they're out. And all I'm suggesting to society is, look, what is an ex-offender? I mean, society appears to have this view of ex-offenders as predominantly people from poor backgrounds, council estates, abusive relationships, poor families, etc., and so forth. And all the help available is targeted towards, those people, which is, fair enough. It's probably makes up half of the prison population, if not 3/4 actually. So my point is, I feel very strongly that once you've served your time and you've done your sentence and you've proved yourself, the slate needs to be wiped clean. I'm not saying that employers are not entitled to make their own decisions, but I do think that this is very harmful and discriminatory to, a democracy, because it is only the taxpayer that's picking up the bill, and it's massive and it's increasing.
Tony, you and I, we've crossed swords before over this. As you know, I'm very law and order kind of guy, throw away the key kind of person. And I wonder where you stand on this, because it sounds to me, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it does sound to me very much like Larry and you are on the same page on this.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a huge believer in justice.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I was talking to Tony.
I am actually.
I'm saying that Tony and you, Larry, Tony, I want Tony to say something, because I know he's keeping quiet to give our guest a chance, but I think our audience will be flabbergasted that he was unable to keep quiet for this long.
Well, I'm actually with Larry here because people are not labeled by what they've done. It's a task, it's an action, it's separate from them. So people, whoever they are in society, can do good and can do bad. It's a choice. But they can choose differently. It doesn't label them or tarnish them forever. So what happens is, if an ex-offender has done that, the word is ex. They've done something incorrectly in the eyes of the law in the past, but that does not mean, despite what people believe, that they'll do it again. If they've been given the right encouragement, the right backing, the right help, they can be an asset to society. They can help. Now, I'm not going to say this blanket that everybody can, because there's some people that have mental issues that need addressing first. I'm not saying they're beyond help either, but that needs to be addressed first and foremost.
Well, you know what, Tony? First of all, I mean, I'm not going to address the fact that you've again. It sounds like you're sitting on the fence. But to be honest with you, okay, here's a straightforward question. You got, well, you've got your kids all grown up now, but you had young children, and someone comes over, and there were sexual offenders against, nothing to do with Larry, of course. There were sexual offenders against
well, nothing that she's admitted to anyway. I'm joking.
I put it to you that if someone came to you and wanted to look after your kids, you'd be like, on balance, no, thank you. I mean, first of all, they want to get a DBSS. I think quite rightly. Good, excellent. Do you then agree that DBSS should not look into a person's police history? Because where are you standing on that?
Right. Let me explain a couple of things, though. Where you just highlighted something very interesting. Sexual deviance is almost an addiction. It's a slightly different thing. If someone has committed offence based on a particular circumstance, like a crime, a robbery, that's not an addiction. That's happened in a particular environment that's caused them to behave incorrectly, and that can be addressed. When you have an addiction to sexuality or whatever it may be, that's a slightly different ballgame, where you have got a problem in the brain that needs to be addressed. So yes, a DBS check is still valid in that scenario, purely because that individual, even though they say, okay, I'm not going to do it again, Gov, they could, because it's an addiction. It's something that is internal to their brain, that they are drawn to it. So
okay, you work in a bank. Yeah, we've heard you. Okay. You work in a bank, and let's say that it's your job to employ people.
Yeah.
And you don't believe in all this, and then you employ somebody who's been in prison before for fiddling the books.
No, I couldn't do that.
Well, you see,
the laws would not be my choice. It's the bank's
I think you're missing. I think, with respect, I think you're all missing the point here slightly.
Okay.
Theo, back to your original point. I'm with you in regard to law and order. Actually, I believe that you should be punished for the crimes that you've committed, and I believe that. I'm quite an upstanding, law-abiding citizen, actually. I'm a lawyer, for God's sakes. Well, actually, maybe that's not a good example, actually, these days. Lawyer, banker, you can make up your own mind, etc. But no, I'm with you in the main. But let's just look at what the crime and punishment, right? Crime and punishment. Okay, so the question really should be, should your punishment end at the end of your sentence, or should it go on for the rest of your life? Because my experience is that once an ex-offender, always an ex-offender. That's your label. That's how society sees you. Thus, the problem is you're seen as a perennial ex-offender and therefore a pariah to society in perpetuity, so forever. And that's the real issue. So if they're going to give you a sentence, then they might as well just give you a life sentence, because that's technically what it means for most people. And that is the truth of it. There is nobody, not the MOJ, not politicians, not ex-offenders, not, normal people who don't disagree with that. So my interest in all of this is not, Tanya, you're entitled to your opinion, on the subject, incidentally, of hiring people who've got, ex-offenders come in different shapes and sizes, and they do different types of things. So if I was running a bank and somebody had committed a crime of dishonesty, now I'll be honest with you, I have a real problem with people who have committed crimes of dishonesty, so theft. It's just me. It's just the way I'm wired. I have a real problem with people who steal from other people, because it's ingrained within me that that's just not correct, But I would say this. I think, obviously you may not want to hire someone who's been cooking the books to run your bank for you. My point is, at which point do we economically shoulder the burden of this forever and ever and ever? Are we going to keep them perpetually incarcerated, not in prison, but in society? Or are we going to at some point wipe that slate clean and go, do you know what? You've got another chance. And at the moment, you only need to put into people's names into Google. It doesn't matter whether their sentence has expired or not. It's still there.
Do Do you think that we could look at a different solution, which is based on my understanding of law and order? Is there any point in bringing, well, because I already know the answer as for what I feel, no, you think we should be thinking about bringing back the workhouse? So if you can't get,
You've already got the workhouse.
well, we haven't, because people
It's
are
called
walking around
prison.
claiming, no, we haven't,
No,
because
no.
people are claiming benefits. In a workhouse system, you come out of prison, you can't get a job, there are no benefits, you're going to have to go into the workhouse. That's all. You go into the workhouse until you can find a way out, like maybe through your very, very laudable effort, Grow Inspires, something like that. But otherwise, I don't see why the state should bear the burden. It's not our fault you committed a crime. It's like, okay, you got to suck it up now.
You're obviating the question, and the question is, if you're passed a sentence in law and the sentence is determined for, say, I don't know, 2 years, let's say, essentially what happens is that sentence then goes on for the rest of your life. Why should the perpetrator bear the burden of societal norms and problems and attitudes towards that sentence?
Because they did that when they crossed the law. That's what happened. The consequences. What you're saying is, why should a person suffer the consequences of their actions? I'm sorry, that's just life. We can't give you a free pass because you feel you deserve it.
Yeah, but hang on, Teo, you can, all right, let's accept your prophecy, your promulgation for 5 seconds and go with that, okay? So there are many people and many of our listeners that would agree with you, okay? But let's look at the economic cost to society of that workhouse. Who is going to basically, so there's a cost to putting these places in train. There's a cost to all of this. All I'm saying, I'm sort of with you actually, Teo. I want these people to become useful members of society. I'm in favour, and always was while I was in prison. I wanted people to do much more work in the community, to actually be put to gainful employment so that they were trained in skills and they had jobs to go to that would put them on the right path so that they could become contributors. Like you, I'm fed up of all these people claiming benefits. It's needless, it's pointless, it's silly, and it's costing the taxpayer billions, absolute billions, when actually maybe there should be a system, as you say, whereas, okay, you can claim benefits, but you're going to have to go and work in this place, that place, or the other place for them.
This is
so that they get trained in doing something. This is not about saying
there's certainly a gap. There's a
gap. Yeah, there's a total gap.
But you have to sort of also manage the situation in terms of, well, okay, how much does it cost to a current offender who's been incarcerated in a low-level prison, for instance? How much does it still cost for them to come out of prison, to do a job, but still be supervised? Because it's gonna be the trust element again. Can they be trusted in the community without supervision? And there's a cost for that while they're being trained. So unless there's a way of adding a service, as Tayo has alluded to, not a workhouse, but an industry which is bolted on to the prison environment, so that when prisoners come out, they have a choice to go into this intermediary stage, learn skills, learn occupations, have something which then allows them to then leave and then join the community at large, bringing something to the table. So they actually have more value when they do come out. So not workhouse, but something in the middle.
But you see, they have that, but they tend to be for the lower level skills, so things like, I mean, in the female estate, the focus is very much upon things like maths and English. So a lot of the kids there don't have maths and English, for example, but there's nothing there. There's no funding for these things, right? And I've always said, Greggs, for example, and Timpsons are really into the prisons at the moment. Of course they are, because the Ministry of Justice pay them quite a lot of money to do this. But it's silly because what we need is full, almost like little mini little universities,
yes.
Really, where you get community businesses in that will actually hire ex-offenders and train them and give them another chance. I mean, I'll tell you, I'm with you, and I hire ex-offenders now, and I tell them straight, and they're out. There's no or are, and that's it, you know, because this is a second chance. It's a second chance for all of us, and we all hold ourselves to these rules. But that way, we're all contributing to making a better society, because we can't have this constant drain on our communities continuously.
Well, this is why this problem is not resolved by any country on the planet.
No,
Everybody has this problem. Everybody discusses, how do we deal with this?
Absolutely, Tony. This is exactly why, through my own experience, I've set up through Grow Inspires the Grow Inspires ecosystem, which I recognise needed high level, entrepreneurship training. But there's no point giving these people who are on benefit £73 a week or whatever it is, loads of training and mentoring if they've got no money. So what we did, we said, okay, they need a couple of things. They need access to a supportive community business network, which will not see them as ex-offenders. In fact, they won't even know that they're ex-offenders, which actually supports businesses and business development and will be nurturing. And then the second thing is, of course, this fantastic platform, Silvertree. They can trade. Nobody knows they're ex-offenders. They just see them as a normal business. So we have done everything in our power to close that loophole and close that gap and address all those things that are really needed right now. So, we've done everything in our power to do that.
Supposing I was an right tense. Supposing I am an ex-offender and I come to you and I say, I've heard about your Grow Inspire. What happens? What do I get out of it? What happens exactly? You've told us it's a charity to help, yeah, but what are the specifics? What do I do? What happens? How do I get benefit from
Okay, so the first thing we do is we run an accelerator program for 7 weeks, which is followed.
Yeah, what is that? Yeah, if you can elaborate for our listeners.
The program is it's a course, basically, a 7-week course it takes you from your business idea, identifying your business idea. And the big difference is it then gets you to test your business idea in the real world before you even start to spend a penny on your business. So, for example, you might come to me, Teo, and you might say, I want to set my own publishing house up, to write books or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a lovely idea, but how is that going to work in practice? Who are your clients going to be? And more importantly, what are those clients prepared to pay you for your services? So the difference, anybody can learn how to set up a business, by sort of filling in the right boxes at HMRC. But what you must do is you need to have road tested your business so that it works, by way of having conducted polls, stand outside supermarkets and asking people, finding who your target audience is and would they pay for what you've got to sell. Once you know those things, you can then start to seriously consider how to put a business together. Because a lot of people start off in business, and I've done this a million times before. A lot of people start off in business, they've got these great lofty ideas. I want to do this, I want to do that, but they've got no comprehension of, well, who's their target market? Is that target market going to pay for their services? And if so, how much? Because that all feeds into the economics of the business planning. So nobody leaves our learning lab at the end of that 7 weeks. They will have a business that they know 100% can be fit for funding. That is absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial. And I've invested in many businesses before and sat on many panels. And this is the thing, this is the major downfall in business. They just don't know their figures. They don't know who their target market is, and they've got no clue.
Absolutely.
I'm not investing in an idea. So we do.
So are you effectively, I'm using the business name, but everyone knows it. Are you a dragon from Dragon's Den?
No, I'm not. But let me just carry on explaining the rest of the ecosystem. Okay. This is why it works so well. So that's what we do in the sort of academic-y part of it, if you want to call it that. We then give them 3 months intensive mentoring on a one-to-one basis with mentors. We then put them into Love Entrepreneurs, and this is crucial because we give them an opportunity to do Love Entrepreneurs. Love Entrepreneurs' signature dish is a big fix, and the big fix is nothing more than you present your business idea to a group of entrepreneurs. And you tell them what the problem is or what you need help with, and you hear comments. That helps you, that gains confidence, so that, you know, enables them to do that. And of course they get a membership of Silvertree, which is a cashless digital business platform where they can trade their goods and services if they don't have any money. So they can trade, a bit like a bartering system with its own currency. So they can start moving their business along without the need to have cash. Because one of the big problems with ex-offenders, and I know this from my own experience, is that if you're an ex-offender, you're not going to have a credit rating, which means you cannot apply for business loans. You're not going to get any, regardless of what the government says, you're just not. There is no funding for ex-offender businesses.
No, the government doesn't do anything. There's no scheme.
Well, there's a startup loan. There's a startup loan scheme which is sponsored by the British banking. I'm gonna get this wrong, but Bank of Business, I think it's called. So there is the startup business loan scheme, which is great, and it gives, and anybody can apply. It gives you £25,000, but of course you've got to have a good credit rating, and a lot of these people won't have a good credit rating. And I should say,
so the government expects ex-offenders to have a good credit rating. I mean, that sounds stupid.
That doesn't make sense at all.
It doesn't make any sense.
No.
Well, that's why Silvertree supports a lot of these businesses. And, you know, going forward, what we will be doing there is we will be sponsoring, and incidentally, I should add, this program, Phoenix, it's called Project Phoenix, works for ex-offenders, but we also do a hell of a lot of work with people who are not ex-offenders.
I was actually going to jump in and say that, because this sounds great for just students and people coming out of uni or education.
What we've done, Tony, we've taken the master's program at Bristol University and we've just shortened it slightly. It's the same information, it's the same stuff. The difference between the kids who are on the master's program at Bristol University is that they've got mummy and daddy who will probably help support their businesses. They're the sort of people who can go off and get bank loans, no problem. Yeah. My interest in, you know, why is it that if you're poor, you somehow, your business idea is just not as good as anybody else's? That's something that really interests me, because of course that's nonsense. As an entrepreneur myself, I know that that is nonsense. I'll give you an example. When I was in prison, I put together a business plan for something I wanted to do. They said, "This is amazing, Larry. This is really amazing, but you know, you're not going to qualify for funding for this because this is a real business."
Who's they? Who said that?
Oh, this was the a department that worked within the prison who was helping with people wanting to set up in business within.
So there already is something there, but they're not exactly helping. They're hindering.
Well, no, but it wasn't a mobile hairdressing salon. It wasn't something that they could comprehend as simplistic or as something that because the problem is the mindset. There is a mindset that if you're an ex-offender, you could only set up something. You can't
limiting.
Limiting. You know, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that I think mobile hairdressing is terrible or anything like that. I mean, in fact, when I went to Eastwood Park, I was gutted because I heard that they had one of my
what I was saying was that in terms of the limiting wasn't derogatory in the term, but in other words, in the scope of their point of view. So. In other words, nothing which is too advanced, something which is too technical that might need, many employees for argument's sake.
Yes, a business that's a scalable business, basically, that could make millions. I mean, because there is a mindset in society that if you're an ex-offender, suddenly you can't run a multinational organisation because you're an ex-offender. Well, I invite people to consider very seriously half of what the government is up to at the moment.
A lot of them haven't been caught yet. That's what it is.
Well, but this is the thing, it's not to sort of poo-poo what the listeners think in terms of, it's right that people are punished for wrongs. Otherwise, you have chaos and you have anarchy. Indeed. All I'm saying,
Los Angeles, 2022.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is that we need to look at this with more of an open mind, with a view to getting a solution that works economically for everybody. And everybody needs to have an input. It's clearly not working at the moment. Back to your idea of what happened to me in prison. Yeah, I mean, there was this image that because you're intelligent and that sort of thing, that somehow, I mean, my probation officer said to me, when I asked her, well, what sort of job do you think I should go for? She said, oh, I think you'd be fantastic at front of house. Now, I have no problem with being front of house. It's not I couldn't care less. My point is, it was that perception. I'm a woman with 4 degrees. I've been a partner in an international law firm. I've worked internationally. I've had my own construction company. I run a hedge fund. I speak 5 languages fluently. Now, is that really the best use of my skills and ability?
No.
That's the question here. Now, I don't care. I mean, I'm happy. As I said, I'm happy stacking crumpets. And I'll turn my hand to anything. Yeah. But I think we are. If
you have a bigger ambition, then it's curtailed by the viewpoints of the people in the prison service saying,
absolutely,
as being an ex-offender, your scope is this. And that's
absolutely.
Whereas you've got the sky as a limit, and you're
absolutely. And we have 2 people who we've trained over 95 ex-offenders now have all got businesses, and 2 of those are now turning over in excess of 200 grand. And that's wonderful.
Are you allowed to say what those are? I mean, obviously, don't name the businesses if you don't wish to, but you can say what sort of industry or.
Yeah, sure. What one is in I was going to say barbarism. I'm not sure that's a word. Cutting beards, being a barber. So she's got about 8 salons now, and the second
barbering, I think, is the word. Barbarism, really worrying there.
Yes. Wrong word there.
Yeah. Sorry. And the other person provides accommodation for people leaving prison, so like halfway houses.
Okay, that's good.
So all of these things and everybody in between, every single one of them is off benefits. So they must be earning in excess of 20 grand. So the thing is, we know this works. We know this works. And all we're saying is, everybody can have their own political views, but everybody, even the most hardened people, I mean, letting people sit in prison just addling away, watching TV all day is such a waste of time. Get them out there, get them into the community, get them working on farms, get them doing stuff.
This is my point that I mentioned earlier. It's there's also a cost with that. Yes, you're benefiting the inmate for doing that, clearly, because they're out of the environment that they were in, but it's the element of trust where we mentioned at the start of the show.
Actually, guys, you're just skirting around the issue of not listening to Tyre as usual. Tyre's position is clear. It's a workhouse. Now, you can have a workhouse outside prison when you've left prison and you're now an ex-offender, but inside prison, you can also have a workhouse. My problem with that is we look over at America and we get scared. Because if we start making money from prisoners, then it becomes the business of the criminal system to find prisoners. And I think that's what's happening in America. It's a very, very dangerous road.
Can you elaborate that, Tayo? Because I'm not aware of this, and maybe our listeners are not. What do you mean they're making money from?
Oh my goodness! I believe that I can't give you the exact figure. Unfortunately, I see so many figures and I've forgotten. But a typical inmate in America is actually a profit-making machine for the prison.
How?
Oh yeah, I can totally agree with that.
Could you explain that for my benefit? I'm not aware, and I dare say our listeners are scratching their heads.
Well, I'm very surprised to hear that. Don't you realize that when you're in prison in America, you got to work. They charge you money for everything. Number one, you can have basic amenities, and you actually pay. And the only way you can pay for these things, which are exorbitant, is that you have to work. The prison factory, whatever it is, that they're doing, you're making license plates or whatever. It's more than that. So it becomes a business. An individual in the prison system, in the prison system in America, is not as we have it here in the UK, where it's a burden on the state, and we should be trying to do everything to get that person out of prison and productive again society, which I believe is Larry's point. But in the United States, it's the exact opposite. So you want people to go to prison and to flipping well stay there because it's like slavery again. It's a form of slavery.
Wow.
Yes, but Teo, you're the one who is in favour in Law and Order.
No, yeah, I said, but what I'm trying to say is I'm thinking that you have to be very careful if you bring workhouses into prison. You have to be very careful that you don't then see the prisoner as free labor.
Well, can I just interject here, just give you an example of what happened at Eastwood Park and you know, what happens in many prisons. So you'll get your Greg's bakery, for example, and, you know, you'll get Timpson's, for example, offering ex-offenders or offenders at the time, they're allowed to be released on wattle, so released on temporary license to go and work in some of their stores.
What do you call that? Wattle?
Wattle. It's
and are they supervised or?
No, hang on. Yeah, of course they're supervised.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but the point is, you know, I was told, well, you're not going to be able to go to Greg's because they wouldn't accept you with your CV. So you've got a lot of people who are qualified sitting in there with nothing to do.
Is that because of the crime itself?
No, nothing to do with the crime itself.
Overqualified. She's overqualified.
Because they're overqualified, you know, because you just won't, you know, they know that, you know, and of course the prison, when you work outside a prison, 50% of everything you earn goes to the prison. So there's a benefit, of course, to the prison to work with people like Greg's because they're very closely supervised, and that's great because they'll probably get jobs on the out, which is fantastic. But 50% of whatever you earn in prison goes to the prison. But Greg's as an employer doesn't have to pay you standard wages at all. They'll pay you, you know, tiny amounts of money compared with.
So it's not minimum wage, as
it's less than minimum wage.
They're not obliged to pay minimum wage to ex-offenders. Wow, I wasn't aware of that.
I don't know why they would be, Tony. I mean, for goodness sakes, they're helping out.
They're doing the job the same as anyone else. So you pay what you're producing, and if they're producing business.
Tony, I want to be clear. I'm not 100% sure because I can't remember. I'm not 100% sure whether they do or don't pay minimum wage. Maybe they do. So I don't want to be accused of misleading anybody here. Okay. But the point is, obviously, the Ministry of Justice will, you know, Greg's technically has access to a very cheap labour source on tap. Now, we at Grow Inspires have tried to contact many different prisons and said, look, because I through Love Entrepreneurs, I've got over 400 businesses that would hire ex-offenders tomorrow to do work for them. And we've been turned down every single time.
What's the reason?
Where's the blocker? Who's doing this?
Well, we don't know. You tell me.
Well, what do they say when you write to them? What do they say back?
You know, they just stop talking to you. I suspect it's because I'm an ex-offender and they have a policy of not really liking to integrate with other ex-offenders because it makes them feel uncomfortable. I don't know, because in the way that prison officers obviously, unfortunately, are tutored is that, you know, offenders are essentially huge security risks continuously, and the mindset is that they can never rehabilitate or change. You know, but that's not their fault.
I'm not trying to be funny, Larry, but honestly, when you said that, I kind of thought in my head, I don't know how to put this politely, but I did, and, you know, I'm not trying to be nasty or anything, but I did think to myself, you know, is that a burgeoning super cell? Well, drugs or whatever, because that is what, if I didn't know you, and if I was a prison officer, or, you know, some kind of official in the prison system, and someone came to me and said, I want a bank of ex-offenders. And I look at the thing, I go, whoa, what on earth is she trying to set up? I would actually put people on you. I'd actually tell the CID to watch you.
No, but Teo, don't forget, we have the backing of Bristol University here too, don't forget. So the other two directors and trustees I have in Grow Inspires are not ex-offenders. They're upstanding members of the community that have been working. One is a, you know, sort of an aspiring Conservative Party candidate, you know. So do you know what I mean? These are all people that care about communities. You know,
I wish you had said any other party but that.
Well, hey,
because right now that's kind of
okay,
shysterville, isn't it?
The point is, though, is that, I'm just a person within this organization. And, I suppose in a way, one of the things that we try and do at Grow Inspires, which I think we do really well, is we get rid of those labels. We're interested in entrepreneurship. We're interested in forgetting the labels and time. We're interested in getting people to contribute to society again. We're trying to alleviate the public purse. We're not interested in the arguments and the reasons why and not why. We work with businesses. We'll work with anybody that wants to make money out of a legitimate business.
Okay. Do you have records and statistics to show a potential employer who would look at you and say, well, what is your success criteria?
Oh, yeah,
what is it that you've got that, is it above average compared to someone going
We've got a 95% success rate compared with what happens. I mean, we've done courses in Bristol at the DWP, Department of Work and Pension, with people on universal credit, and we've had a 95% success rate to bring them off benefits.
Wow. That's quite compelling. That is.
Well, it is, because there is no way that following our system that they cannot set up a sustainable and successful business. That is
because they're setting up a business, they're more, what's the word I'm looking for? They're more engaged in making it a success and not going back to old ways, because they're invested in their business, which is their choice, their way of bringing it to the fore. So you've now converted someone who was an ex-offender, regardless of what their past was, into an upstanding member of society, because they're fully invested in the business. Exactly.
Absolutely.
And they've become an asset to society on the whole. Why are you not screaming this from the rooftops?
We are trying to. This is why I'm here, Tony. I'm screaming from your rooftop today.
Indeed. I think this is something which isn't publicized at all, because I'll be frank with you, I did not know an organization such as yours existed.
One of the reasons is, Tony, we struggle, and Taya, we struggle with getting funding because what we're doing is so outside the box. It's never been done before. It's very entrepreneurial and it's innovative, but it's not really. It's obvious. And when we're getting there, we're starting off. But don't forget, we started, we don't get any funding. We have to do this pro bono, right?
How do you keep your company running then? How do you do that? You must have overhead costs,
belief, and we spend. Mark and I do this pro bono, so we do this because we believe in doing it.
Wow, that's very admirable.
But the point is, opportunities like this are great because we can spread the message and people can get involved.
Indeed. How? I mean, I'm intrigued that this is not something that the government or anyone in a position of influence could actually take this on board and even trial it, give you the funds and say, okay, here's some money, put this in place with this location. Let's see how you perform and give you some backing. Because clearly 95% of, I don't know what the numbers are, but 95% of a figure is really high. And that's something that shouldn't be sort of sniffed at. So if anybody's listening here that has any influence that could help you even make those first inroads into somebody who could perhaps look at you as a company and a viable project that could say, look, let's trial this. Let's see where this takes us.
One of the things, Tony, one of the things we're looking for is any companies out there that feel that they would like to contribute or sponsor a seat for somebody to come and do this project. That's what we're starting to do now, is turn to industry to sponsor the work that we're doing. So if there's anybody there that feels that they want to get involved in this, or want to at least talk about it or review it, then I'm more than happy to talk to anybody anytime, day or night. Preferably.
How would a company sponsor?
Yeah, exactly.
What does that mean? How would they sponsor?
Get in touch with you? What have you got, a website? Have you got anything?
Well, I thought we'd leave that to the end of the show, Tony.
Okay. Well,
Well, we've got a website. It's www.growinspires.org. I can be reached at Eleri, that's ELERI, at growinspires.org. And in terms of sponsoring, they would give any amount of money, really. We're talking probably minimum contributions of £100, £200. We are hoping to up that to say, it costs us, if we were to cost this out, it costs us about £5,000 to run a course for, say, 10 participants. So, sort of £500 would cover the cost of one participant to do the course from beginning to end. So, yeah, if people want to get involved with the work that we're doing, I have to say, we're starting up doing this. We've been doing the Grow Inspires. We've been doing Phoenix now for 4 years, but it's only last August I had the foresight to connect the dots and stick the ecosystem around it. And it's only really since we put the ecosystem around it and we're able to give them funding have we really hit huge success rates, if that makes sense.
Yes, indeed. So you've hit on a solution end to end, really.
Yeah.
That gives people that opportunity. So you really do. Have you spoken to MPs to try and get your message out there?
Oh, do you know what? I mean, I hate to be negative about this. When I came out of prison, I have spoken to every single organisation under the sun, MOJ, DWP. We're on the DPS too for DWP. The problem is the people who decide on whether they're going to give funding don't understand entrepreneurship. And as Teo quite rightly said, don't forget, this is a cronies business. It's not as bad as government cronies at the moment, but it's still the same sort of system. It's jobs for people who tick boxes. We focus simply on outcomes. We're not interested in ticking boxes. Our outcomes are, is this a sustainable business at the end? Are they now contributors, not claimants? Those are our outcome rubrics. We're not interested in taking money from government just to tick a box and deliver no outcomes. We're entrepreneurs, so we're always interested in results.
Very difficult, I think.
And the problem is those who evaluate bids these days are not entrepreneurs. They look upon what we're doing. They don't understand it because nobody's ever done it before. To an entrepreneur and any normal and sane person, this is entirely obvious because it provides a solution. But I wonder sometimes whether they really want a solution. Because they're so busy funneling money from each other around the system to deliver mediocrity. It's jobs for all the boys, isn't it? It's the same old story. Indeed. We're outsiders.
You're providing an answer, and maybe they don't actually want that answer.
I'm not sure they do. I don't know. I mean, I would like to think that they do. The cynic in me tends to, having spoken to hundreds of people, I just get the impression that a lot of them just don't comprehend this. So what I've decided to do is do this commercially.
I don't think that, you see, I'm not a conspiracy buff anyway, but I really don't think that it's a conspiracy. What I think it is I put myself in their shoes. And almost as soon as you start talking, I'm switched off, Larry.
Why?
See, well, because I'm sorry, because of what you said about being, no, seriously, because of what you said about being an ex-offender. As soon as she says that, it just kicks in. I've put myself in their shoes. And
so
as soon as she opens her mouth.
In other words, you prejudge. You're not got an open mind.
As soon as she opens her mouth, it's whatever comes out afterwards, after I'm an ex-offender, I'm just waiting for her to leave the office. I'm not really listening.
Except that it's not just me making these pleas. There are, Mark Neild will do it.
Anybody who's with you is tarnished with the same brush. If we come in a group, I'm telling you, try this in future. Send someone else, not you.
No, Teo, we have done, and we've had exactly the same responses.
Well, that's amazing. Maybe you should send me. Because I don't know what they're saying. Because if it's
the problem is, Teo, getting them to speak to you. Don't forget, these are people who are desperate to keep their jobs.
Indeed.
If we come up with the solution, what would happen to their jobs? What would happen to their funding? Absolutely. They'd all be out of jobs. There's no interest in them working with us or helping us at all.
So it's like what you said earlier. Well, we just touched on it. Really, is they you have an answer to the problem, but they don't want the answer. They're happy to keep the status quo because it is just job preservation. They're not interested in a solution because ultimately, long term, their jobs will be on the line. So they're just in preservation mode and go, oh, well, this could be a solution, but nah, let's not do that. I want to reel it back because I'm mindful the time's progressing. We're not far from the end of the show, but I want to go back to what Tayo made a point earlier on in the show about adopting a US approach to this, where you said workhouses in prisons become a commercial benefit for the prison. And Hilary said that the companies, I don't want to name them, may pay minimum wage, but we don't know yet. We'd have to clarify. So that's a workhouse scenario you're saying, Tayo, in the prison, which we don't want to get to. But if we have this middle ground, which is like an area where people can be trained, taught, it's like a university training.
Yeah,
they can then move out.
Can I just explain what happens to those who haven't been to prison? Okay, so the first thing they'll prevent you from doing, security. The security department is a massive thing in prison. Okay, so they won't allow you mobile phones, obviously, and they won't allow you any access to the internet. Okay, now there is this thing called the intranet, which the whole learning campus, where they're trying to sort of test different things. Now, I know that in male prisons, they also do lots of training that you don't get in female prisons. So you'll have woodwork, you'll have mechanics. There's some brilliant things happening in the male estate. But because the female estate is only about 4,000, 5,000, they tend to get nothing. So when I arrived at Eastwood Park, they had they used to have a hair training salon there, which sadly, when I arrived, had stopped working because they had no funding for it. So there was no training really for women. Certainly, that they offered things like, well, they didn't really offer anything. They offered basic maths, English, things like childcare. It was very infantilized. So there was no training around business or anything that was slightly more aspirational. It was very basic, things like they taught you basic painting and decorating, cleaning, that sort of thing. And I always wondered, well, what a wasted opportunity, because it's very easy, or rather, it's very difficult for a business coming from the outside to get through the prison security problem. The problem with all of this is prison security. They don't, it's really quite locked down, if you like. They did nail painting and that sort of thing, but nothing that I would have classified as getting you, training you for proper jobs, because they won't let people out of the prison, you see, that this is the thing. And I think there needs to be, there's a will there.
There's a political element here, because if someone's been incarcerated with a prison term, they're expected to serve that term in the prison, not taking time out the prison to benefit them. It's crime.
Yes and no. If you go on release on temporary license, which you're allowed to do, which they release many prisoners to work in the community day in, day out. But because the male estate is so much bigger than the female estate, there's much more advancement there than there is in the female estate. There's hardly anything for the female estate in that respect, unless you want to go and work at Greg's or Timpson's. But and of course that does bring, but then again, when I was at Eastwood, they were going to bring a call centre into the prison. Some of the female prisons do have call centres, and I think that's a great idea, but it never went any further. I don't know why. I have no idea why, but there needs to be, not the workhouse, but there does need to be some sort of, there's lots of free labour here where people would really be able to contribute to businesses.
Okay.
Now, you were asking me, Tony, because
you need to wrap it up, Tyler.
I know, that's what I'm
final points. Yeah.
In America, I'm looking at this website. It's called archive.attention.com. Attention is spelled ATTN. It costs an average of $23,000, call it $24,000 annually, $1,000 a month, basically, to house a prisoner in America. So the states have handed out the business to companies, and companies that run prisons require a 80 or 90% occupancy, right? So that's one thing. It's actually sign a contract, and if they've got empty beds, the state has to pay them for an empty bed. So what do you think that the state would tell
But
it?
that's because, Teo, hang on a minute, that's because it's a private prison.
Yeah, private prison.
Right. So, for example, your UK example of that would be, we do have some private prisons. Park, for example, in Bridgend is a private prison. And, there's a whole bunch of contractors that make their money from prison work. So if there were no prisoners, if everybody was rehabilitated, where would those jobs go?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So that would not be well, it's great for the exchequer, but it wouldn't be good for those prisoners because you're encouraging them to go in because it's making people money.
It's not really great for the exchequer, is it? It's great for if the exchequer takes in on the one hand and then has to
from
pay
the contractors who are
no, but has to then pay out on the other hand when all these people come out and have to claim from the state.
Well, yes, in that
so
instance,
actually
they discourage them coming out.
Yeah, yes. But actually you're in a zero net position, aren't you, in terms of tax? Because actually it takes you right back to zero. So what you want to be is in a plus rubric.
So what are we saying then? Are we going to, I'm mindful of the time, we're overrun here, but are we saying therefore we want a similar system but hybrid? So you have private prisons. So if someone does get incarcerated, it doesn't cost the government any money to run the prison because it's run by a third party and they actually charge the prisoners for their labor. So they benefit from that while the prisoner's in the prison. But then in between then, once that inmate has finished his sentence and he's allowed out, he should go into a middle section of the final 3 months of their sentence. They then moved into a middle layer, which is the training layer, where they now go for a 3-month course. They train, they could be an entrepreneur, they could be whatever it may be, in an intensive training in 3 months for preparing them out into the community.
I think that's a great idea, but I don't want it privately run. I'd want it run by the government. And just to correct you on the American system, the American government pays the private contractors a levy to deliver services.
It's not totally free.
Well, they pay them 70 billion apparently, because that's how much they earn. Private companies in private.
Yes, but this is how it works in the United Kingdom. In fact, this is how Park was set up on the basis of that American system, because it's the same company that runs Park as runs some prisons in the States.
I would like a system where the government runs the prisons. When prisoners come out, they've got 5 years of not being in trouble and help along the lines that Larry does, help along those lines, or just simply getting a job, because I really wouldn't want to be talking benefits at all. So that's where the workhouse comes in. If you can't get a job on your own, you're not going to get any benefits whatsoever. You're going to have to go and work in a workhouse. Stay out of trouble for 5 years. At the end of the 5 years, your record for most crimes is not expunged, but nobody's going to know. And there's no need to tell anybody you were an ex-offender, and then your DBSS you pass.
What are you going to do about Google?
Okay, that's a separate issue for another time.
I don't really know. I never really thought about Googling people.
Okay, we're going to have to end it there, I'm afraid. Larry, thank you for coming on to our show.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Fun.
Okay, thank you. And I hope our listeners have enjoyed that. But unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show for another week.